this session where we're going to talk about medical CV writing when you're preparing for jobs. And what I'd like to focus on in this session is the PG or postgraduate year 1 and 2 applications. So if you're a final year student applying for an internship position, or if you're an intern applying for a PGY2 position, whether it be training or non-training, this is really relevant to you. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what should be put in a CV or a resume, and I hope to kind of clarify some of that and provide what I think is a rational approach to making a CV that is going to be very readable and is really going to bring out the best of what you can offer as a junior doctor or a potential junior doctor to your potential employees. The first thing to talk about is what's the difference between a resume and a CV. So a CV, or a curriculum vitae, which I believe is the French background, is a more comprehensive list of your education and occupational pursuits, including some other interests. And a resume is more of a briefer, more succinct version of the same thing. And generally, whether you entitle it a CV or a resume, I would very much advocate for using the resume format of being more of a highlights document rather than a comprehensive listing of everything you've done. And the reason for that is the people that employ interns and particularly PGY2 doctors have dozens, if not hundreds of applicants applying for those positions, and there are a lot of positions. And so you really want to make sure that your resume or your CV is really highlighting the best strengths that you have to offer your potential employer, rather than them getting bogged down in too much detail that is going to look very similar from candidate to candidate. So that's one of the biggest guiding principles that I would strongly advocate for. And within that, what does that look like practically? The first thing is to aim for your CV or resume to be at maximum 2 pages long. And every year or every time you're applying for a job, you'll need to go back in, add newer, updated, more valuable items, and prune out the older items that are of less value and less relevance. So as you move towards applying for internship, most of your high school-based activities need to be removed. So as an internship applicant, it's important to list where your high school was, but putting your ATAR score, the merits that you achieved, the particular subjects, don't add value to your CV, in my opinion, because there's so many people that are going to be looking very similar. Most medical students have high ATARs, most of them have multiple merits, most of them have received awards or medals, or was the prefect at school. It doesn't make you stand out because the standard that we're working with is very high. So listing your high school is good. If you want to include just one line of highlights, do, but make sure it's things that are really distinguishing yourself above a quite high achieving level of peers. That's important to consider. Likewise, things that are of value within the CV are going to be things that are more based around qualifications, publications, and particular experience relevant to what's going to make you a better junior doctor. So being the social secretary for a student society is not a high value item. And if you're including a lot of lower value items in there, it could be very easy for your potential employer to miss the high value ones. And that's why I'd always advocate for pruning down things. So I would say actual publications are good to include. Research-based activities, whether for higher degree or for publication or not, can be included. Again, making sure they're concise so they're not taking up too much space on your CV. And I would also include things that are more of a teaching value. So if you've had opportunities to do teaching and mentorship, those are of value as well. The things that are more organising events, being a secretary or a treasurer or president of a particular society, may not be seen as a particularly outstanding achievement, but those other things are definitely relevant and may be relevant in the first few years. It's also good to include a few highlights of things that show who you are outside of the workplace. So what are your extracurricular interests? And that might be languages or your particular interests or sports and particular other achievements. Again, the more relevant are going to be the more recent ones and the ones that are going to more distinguish you from your peers. That should be the guiding principle when you're deciding, should I include this or should I not? And if it's of less value, consider taking it out because it may distract from the actual items that are high value. Finally, I think it's really good to include 3 references or referees at the end. They're often listed separately on applications, but just listing them there. And again, concisely including them there, not so they don't take up too much space. Now, in some cases, that you will go to 3 pages because perhaps you've managed to get a number of case reports or other things published and it naturally spills over. So if you're going over to 3 pages because there are a lot of what you would see as relevant and high value items, that's fair enough. But otherwise, really try to keep it down into 2 pages. As you move into PGY2 space, you want to think about quickly pruning out again those items that are of university level. You're going to prune almost all of the high school based things or primary degree if you've done medicine as a postgraduate, and you're going to focus on just those high yield awards or publications or accomplishments or qualifications you've done in the latter part of your university, and then be trying to replace a lot of those items with experiences, so noting your intern rotations and particular extracurricular occupational things that you have either done, or intending to do, or have commenced, because there's plenty of people who during internship will start just a one subject at a time higher degree via coursework or attend an adult advanced life support program, ALS 1 or 2. Those are kind of things that would be really good, much higher yield and relevance to include, and start replacing your older items from your times as student society positions or being a mentor to first years and things like that. So always just thinking each year, what are the things that I should be adding that are going to value add and show that I'm relevant and continuing my professional development, versus what are the things that are kind of becoming outdated and are not helping me stand out from the crowd. And that's very much the case in terms of student placements. So having some employers will ask for a comprehensive list of your student placements, especially for internships, but beyond that, you're going to kind of cut them out. And in fact, if they're not asking for it, I would generally advocate for commenting on the outstanding, like the elective placements you've done, either interstate or overseas, or additional projects or additional experience that you've done. Again, that principle of what makes you stand out from your peers. Because if you've done the core surgical, medical, psychiatry, ED, anesthetics, whatever it else is there, listing them takes up space but does not value add above the peers that you're applying with. Again, coming back to that principle. Finally, the way that you present your CV or resume is really important. So the formatting should be very consistent. So how are you using, if you're using bold or dot points or lines or titles, making sure that that's very consistent throughout. Making sure that the format that you use in terms of date listing and the position you put the dates is important. So for example, you may start with the most relevant first, going to the oldest things, or you may do the oldest going to the most recent later. You may choose to put the dates at the beginning. You may choose to put the dates at the end. Whichever way you do it, make sure every section is aligning with that same kind of consistent formatting that's there. Likewise, don't feel because you're trying to squeeze it into 2 pages that you should make it small font and crush everything in and expand the borders. That makes it look too busy, and again, detracts from those high value items that are going to be there. So you want to make sure that there is adequate space, that you may be adding lines between each paragraph or between each listing of section, so that the reader feels that they can be drawn and easily find the relevant sections according to them. I hope that's helpful. I think the last thing to say, apart from that advice, is to take your CV draft or your resume draft to someone that you respect, that maybe has been working, has done these applications before, or is more of a supervisor, and say, would you mind giving me some feedback on my resume? What are the things that you think are good and valuable that I should keep? What suggestions do you have for maybe cutting down or adding to my CV to make it really show the best that I have to offer? Again, that principle of saying, this is a highlights document, not a comprehensive listing. I hope that's helpful. I hope it makes sense. At the end of the day, I hope that you can make a CV or resume that really reflects the best that you can be for your potential jobs.